Okay, so we're good to go. So, can you guys hear me fine, I hope?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. Sorry about yesterday. I was when I was recording yesterday, I had two screens here, and somehow my kid's smart cat's Pokemon to my other screen, and there's nothing I could do, and I couldn't hear you. So that's what happened yesterday. But today we're going to continue animation. Yesterday I showed you how to rig some the different styles of rigging. So or animating with parenting and grouping, or putting bones on things and just parenting things to the bones, like if it was a mechanical object, and then putting bones in a mesh and skin binding. So skin binding was in here under rigging, so skin and skin bind, or bind skin, I guess. Adding skeletons to things. I showed you also forward kinematics, which means animating from the base joint out. So in the case of a arm, the base joint would be the shoulder. You would rotate the shoulder, then rotate the elbow, then rotate the hand or the wrist. So that would be forward kinematic. Inverse kinematics means grabbing a limb, like for example the hand in this case, or the wrist, and pulling the wrist, and the chain follows it. So the elbow follows when you move the wrist, and the shoulder does too. So those are the things we covered. We'll go back to them if we have enough time. The first thing you're going to animate is a bouncing ball. And for the bouncing ball, I want you to do two things that I've realized have been very, very important to emphasize, and students keep missing. The first one is to use reference.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
The next assignment that shows us do is the solar system. Is that dead?
Yes, I thought I unpublished it. Well, yeah, don't worry about it. I'll unpublish it. I thought I did, but I guess
Okay.
I didn't hit save.
Cool.
I might have hit the button, not hit save. So that was about parenting, but I think with what I'm showing you, it should be enough. So grouping things and parenting that I showed you yesterday, I think you're showing it to use enough. Because a lot of you have expressed a desire to animate your Lego character. How many of you want to do that? How many of you want to animate your Lego character? Nobody does now? Well, that's not what I got before. Alex says it would be fun. Galicia says I don't, but I want to animate other stuff in Maya. Okay, and that's fine. So the first thing, is we're going to animate the bouncing ball. So you're going to, with the bouncing ball, I'm going to try to teach you the basics of how you animate in Maya. There's something called the graph editor, which a lot of people gets lost on it. But the basics of animation are timing, and in the case of the bouncing ball is curves. So those principles, and the main one that everybody misses is using reference. So the problem with not using reference for animation is that it's really hard to draw something out of your head, right? Without any kind of reference. So imagine if drawing something is hard out of your head, animating something without any reference, it's incredibly hard. And it is very, very hard. Unless you have years and years animating, I don't suggest you try it because it's not gonna look good. So, oh, if you're brave and you want to try it, go for it. But what I want you to do for animating a bouncing ball is, first of all, look for reference. So we're going to go to YouTube and we're going to say bouncing ball, or you can with your own camera or your phone record your own video. So here's bouncing ball reference videos. There's 16 videos on YouTube. And I want you to think about, okay, what am I going to use a reference? What do I want to animate? Something bouncing slowly, like a beach ball or a balloon with water, or a ping pong ball that's faster and it moves a lot. So by looking at reference, you will get two things. One of them is the timing, how long things takes to bounce. You know, so this basketball took a lot longer to stop than the beach ball did. So those things are super hard to get out of just your imagination, you know. So and you'll see like accomplished animators like Disney animators or DreamWorks, they are always recording themselves acting their scene before they start animating it, just so they have some starting point. You know, you don't have to copy what you see exactly for animating, but you have a starting point. And we for this assignment are going to copy it exactly. Why? Because I don't want you to give your ball a personality. I don't want the ball jumping. I say like I have. And students keep doing this. They keep making the ball make decisions like, okay, I'm gonna stop now, and then I'm gonna start bouncing like if I was jumping. Why don't I want you to do that? Is because I can evaluate it as far as realism, like how real the animation looks. And if you learn to animate realistically first by copying something, you'll be able to stylize things afterwards. So it's just mainly for the sake of learning animation and the assignment that it's better if you use real world reference and you try to keep your animation realistic instead of giving the ball a personality. You know, this is not going to be a short. The problem with giving your ball a personality is that you run into issues that I can't judge if the movement is realistic or not, if it's the ball thinking on its own that it wants to walk or it wants to roll, you know. Oh, and the other thing, do not use physics. I have some students use physics simulations on the ball. That does not count either. I want you to learn how to animate things. So after you have your reference, that gives you an idea of how long the ball takes to bounce, or how many bounces it has, or how high it jumps back up in space. You're going to plan your animation. You're going to say, okay, maybe in Photoshop or some other drawing program, it doesn't matter which one. See, where's my pencil here? You're going to draw what is going to happen. So maybe the ball is bouncing down the stairs, or it bounces a couple times and then it hits a wall, or it bounces and it hits another object on the floor. You know, you're going to plan how it moves around, and based on your reference, you know what your reference is. You can get a reference with your phone, I guess, and set up the same obstacles, or what you saw online, you know. With the timer here on the bottom of the movie, you can see, okay, the ball fell from about this high. It took it was on the air so many frames or so many seconds, you know. I can do the same on my animation. Oops. So let's see. So then you can come into Photoshop and show me what you're going to do. This is going to be your pre-production. So everything needs to have a plan at first so it works. You can wing some things when you're working on it, but it's better if you start with a plan. So let me get my layers here. Am I at these layers now? Are they changing symbols on me? There we go. So I'm just going to draw, let's say, you want, there's my floor, the ball is going to hit this thing here. Oof, I can't draw at all this morning. And then it's gonna hit a wall. So then you show me the path the ball is going to follow. So okay, the ball is going to go like this, boing, 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 or you know, you can draw the ball too if you want to. With the ellipse tool, you can make a new frame. Why is it not drawing? Photoshop has gotten super slow for some reason. So there, you can hit Control J to duplicate the layer, and V will move the layer. So maybe you can even put the squash and stretch if you want to. Skew, you know. Hit enter to complete that, and duplicate it. Control J will duplicate the layer. Control T will distort it. That's not what I want. Free transform, that's what I want. Come on. Oh, it doesn't want to do it. You get the idea. So there's my ball squash. It might be a little too big. Remember, you have to keep the proportions. So this one's also too big. And so on. You just repeat it and show me what the ball is going to be doing. So this is going to be your pre-production. That's the first thing is do. But first of all, get reference for it. Don't make it too complicated, because the whole point of this assignment is to learn how to move things in 3D. So I'm going to show you how to move some things in 3D here. I've shown you a little bit about it, but there's a couple things that usually get a little tricky, especially the graph editor. So in my workspace, I'm right now on UV editing. I'm going to change to animation. So yesterday we were looking at animation. Now we are rigging. Today we're going to be looking at animation in here. And usually it should open with your graph editor. It only has the timeline on the bottom. This is the timeline. This timeline tells you how many frames you have. So right now it's saying it starts on 1 and it ends on 200. But of those 200 frames, I'm only seeing 120. So I see 1 in here and I see 120. So this is what I'm seeing in here. And this bar kind of moves through those frames. Why does it work like that? Because you may have an animation that's 2 minutes long, and let's say at 60 frames, So you go here and squash this to 60 frames. From 60 frames to 85 frames, the character is smiling. So you just want to pay all your attention to those frames. So you can zoom in on those frames. So there'll be 65, and then I can zoom in even more to 85, and then you can just animate those frames only, and you don't have to look at the whole thing. You can also play those frames only. It won't play frame 1 all the way to 200. I'll just play those little frames. Okay, and then when you're done, you can zoom back out, and if you open the bar all the way, you can see all your 200 frames. If you want your animation to play to have more frames, you can just type it in here on the last square. It says 200. Let's say I want my animation to be 6,000 frames. You can just type that in there. I'm still seeing 200, but if I zoom out with the bar here, there are my 6,000 frames. You also have your play button right here, play forward. You can skip between keyframes to 1 frame and all the way to the beginning or the end. Right now our animation is playing on 24 frames per second. You can't change it to whatever your production is. So for some reason I got a lot of this 29.97 animation. People that was making video, they're still using this format. Your animation, if you hit play, you'll see that this is not moving at 24 frames per second. It's going really fast. That is because the setting of Maya is set by default to play as fast as it can. So if you have a bunch of animation on your scene, it's gonna move slowly. It's not gonna move real time. So it plays as fast as it can. So if you see this little guy here on the bottom that's running on the bottom right side of the screen, if you click on him, the preferences, there it is. Preferences for animation should show up. So by default, this playback will be set to 3 right here. So that means it'll play as fast as it can. So let me hit save so you see the difference. So look at my time indicator here. It's going super fast. So that's obviously not real time. It's going too fast. So if I wanted to play real time, you have to click on the guy and say, instead of free playback, play 24 frames per 1 second, and say save. Now it should play at the right speed. Okay, so this is the timeline. Can also set keyframes. So let's say I want in frame 1 to my bolt be here. If I hit S, it should. Oh, it's not doing it anymore. Well, usually the shortcut is S, short key for keyframes. That might be changed, but I don't like doing it that way anyway, because it puts a key on absolutely everything. So it puts a key on translate, rotate, scale, and visibility. Even you might not be using visibility at all, or might not be rotating, it puts a key on everything. So when you try to clean up the animation, there's all these keys that you're not using that are just taking up space. So I'm going to show you what I prefer, how to key things. So let's say I wanted to move the ball this way. So my starting point would be in frame 1. I want to key the position. Let's see, I'm going to move it only on the, let's see, what axis is this? On the Z axis. So I would select the key, the channel here on the channel box, and say key selected. So you right click on the name, say key selected. Then you change animation happens in time, so I have to change the time. So we know 24 frames equals 1 second. Let's say I want it to take 2 seconds. So I'm going to go to 48, move the ball over to where I want it to end, and then right click on translate Z again and say key selected. So now the animation is happening. Okay. And I don't have a bunch of keyframes that I'm not using. I just keyed the one channel, the one that I'm using. You can grab your, let's say this is too slow. I don't like it, it's too slow. It's moving too slow. I want it to happen faster. You can right click on the red line, which is your keyframe, and say cut. And then go to another frame and right click on the frame and say paste, and paste. Now my animation takes 28 frames instead of 48. So it's happening faster. When you change to the animation workspace, you should see by default the graph editor. And mine is in another window. That's why I'm not seeing it. Okay, so let me bring it over here. If I can. Come on. There. So I'm gonna try to snap it here. If Maya will let me. Okay. So what is the graph editor? Is a representation of your movement. So if you were sleeping now, I want you to pay attention. Because the graph editor is where everybody gets lost. So animation, we know it happens in time. So time, just like in After Effects, in Maya is represented from left to right. So you start here and then move to the right. That's time passing, right? So it works the same on the graph editor. Time passes from left to right. Now the change of value is either positive or negative. And how do you know if it's positive or negative? So I know I'm moving on the z-axis, right? I'm moving on the z-axis. How do I know if it's going the positive way? It's because that's the way the arrow is pointing on the z-axis. So this is positive. If I pass the middle and go this way, this is negative. Okay, that's simple enough, I hope. It's like geometry. So this is your graph. This is the 0 point. Positive is towards the side that the arrow is pointing, and you can see this little gizmo here is showing you the same thing. The Z positive is that way. If you ever find yourself like this and it's like, oh, it looks good, and then you realize it's upside down because the y-axis is pointing down, that's why. So you can pay attention with it, with this little gizmo here. It tells you if you're going on the positive or negative way. So that's simple enough in here. When it gets tricky is on the graph editor. So positive change of value on the graph editor is going up on the, and it doesn't matter if it's the rotation or the scale or the translate. If it's a positive value, it's going to be going up. If it's a negative value, it's going to be going down. So let's say on frame 48, I go back on the negative and I key it. You will see, and I'm going to hit F on top of the graph editor so I can see the whole curve. So you can see negative is going down on the graph editor. So anytime there's a change of value on any of your channels, if it's positive, it's going to be going up. If it's negative, it's going to be going down on your graph editor. If there's no change of value, let's say the ball just stays there for a long time. Let's say we go to frame 100 and I set a key again. You will see a straight line. And this is important to understand the graph editor. So no movement is a straight line on the graph editor. If you're going up or down faster on the graph editor, you'll see, if you're moving fast, you'll see a lot of change on the curve. So it'll be really steep or really deep, you know. You'll see a lot of change. That means more animation. So if the curve is going up really fast, that means more animation. If the curve is going flat, it means no animation. So if the curve is going down really fast but then starts to flatten, that means it's slowing down. The movement is slowing down. Okay, and this has to do with the slow in and slow out that we watched the movie last night, or yesterday, I'm sorry. So when the movement is slowing in, you see more frames. Things are happening slower. So all 3D software by default has slow in and slow out turned on. So let me just delete this. So, and actually let me move this closer. So I'm moving it closer in time on the graph editor. I'm just grabbing my keyframes and moving them closer, so you can see what I'm doing. So the ball is going to this point, right? From point A to point B. If I hit play, you'll see it slowly comes out of the keyframe, and then it slowly stops. So slow out and slow into the next keyframe. So by default, most 3D software will have this turned on, because they know, okay, so most things move in not in a constant speed, but they kind of slow out of movement. They kind of slowly start running or slowly start moving an arm, then pick up speed, and then they don't just stop like all of a sudden. They slow into a stop to grab your toothbrush, or slow into a stop to start walking from running. So by default, this thing is turned on. But there are certain things that you do not want to have that change on them. You want them to be at constant speed. For example, planets spinning, they always move at the same speed. A bullet might move at the same speed. That's called a linear curve, or linear speed, I should say, because you won't have this slow out, this curve in here at the beginning, and this curve at the bottom, at the end. So if you select your keyframes, like both of them, and you click this line here, this is called linear tangents. It'll make your speed constant. So the speed is always the same from beginning to end. And if I play it now, you'll see the difference. So same speed, stops like a robot. If I rewind here, the speed is always the same. Now let's change it back to auto tangents. You'll see the slow in and slow out. Okay, so these things here affect your curve. So this makes these flat curves, like and I'll show you when I make the ball bounce here. This makes your speed constant, and we're going to use a lot of this. Most tangents here are locked, the one side of the curve and on the other side of the curve, and I'll show you how that works now, I guess. Let me just delete these keyframes, and I'm going to reset my ball back to 0. And like I mentioned before, you usually want to have...
What button did you press to delete keyframes?
I just select them, I just marquee them in here, and I just hit delete. You know, I'm gonna turn Karnak on so you can see what I'm hitting, just in case. So like I mentioned yesterday, before you start animating, you want to make whatever change you've made to the character to be its default, right? So right now in here is remembering that I scaled it. I don't want it to remember that. I want it to that be its default scale. So I'm gonna hit freeze transformations up here, and actually I don't want my ball to be halfway into the grid, so I'm going to hit this the side view, I guess, and I'm just gonna move it up. I don't want it halfway in the grid. I want it to stay there on the grid. So oh, come on, Maya. Doesn't want to do perspective view. Okay, so I want this to be its default position. So let's remember, and I moved it again. I'm gonna freeze the transformations. So this is all my defaults now. So position is going back to 0 by just hitting the freeze transformations. So now I'm ready to start animating. So let's say I wanted to make the ball bounce. So I'm going to go to frame 1, and on the Y I'm going to set a keyframe, because you know you have to have a starting frame. Let's actually make it start from the top, like it's coming down, so it has a reason to bounce. So I'm going to key that, and then let's say it bounces in 15 frames. So I move to frame 15, and I change my value here. I know I put the ball at 0, I put it touching the grid, so I'm just gonna type 0 in here, and I'm gonna key it, and then I'm gonna make it bounce. Since it came down on 15 frames, I'm just gonna do the same. I'm gonna make it go up on 15 frames. Say this much. I'm going to key it at frame 30. So you always change the time first before you make the animation change. So I'm gonna come to frame 45, and you can drag the time here on the timeline, or you can drag this yellow indicator here on the graph editor, and I'm going to key it here. Oops. At 0 value, so it's going back to the ground. Let's say it comes up, instead of 60 frames, let's say a little bit less, 58. Or actually should be slowing down, huh? Well, it's gonna be a smaller jump, so I'm gonna say 58. I'm going to, oh, I gotta make my change for it to bounce up again, and key it. Then I'm just eyeballing things here. I'm gonna go back down to 0. Key it. Okay, so now I have an animation, right? So if I hit F on my curve here, this is what I see. And if I hit play, I'm gonna look at the bounce. Does it look like it's bouncing? No, it looks terrible, right? You can say that. You can tell. Katie says no. Alex says he didn't see it. Let me go back. Okay, how many frames is it? No, it's just like floating. Does just look like keyframes. It isn't fluid yet. Okay, right? So this is when experienced animators make fun of you and say, moving stuff doesn't mean you're an animator. This is exactly the example. So how can you fix that? How can you make this a good animation? So I'm gonna zoom in here. I think I only went to frame 67. That's probably good. So how can I fix this? The way you fix this in 3D is with the graph editor. Okay, so that's why it's so important to understand those things. Like a curve going up means a change on the positive axis, or positive value here, a change going down means a negative value on the channel. A straight line means no animation. A curve going straight up or straight down, going to flat, means the animation slowing down. So I can see in here, okay, my ball is up here and has slow out from the first keyframe. So it's kind of flat, and it slowly starts picking up speed and slows down to the ground, which doesn't happen in real life. We know a ball is not gonna come and stop before it hits the ground. It's gonna be coming at full speed when it hits the ground, and it's gonna hit it at full speed. So how can we reflect that on the curves here that we're looking at? You could go in here and keyframe it again, but that takes forever. So that's why they came up with the graph editor. So what we're going to do is we're going to select these keyframes at the bottom, and you see this tangent. So the tangent has these two handles here that you can adjust it with, but they're stick together, so it's still going to slow in or slow out of that keyframe. So what we need is to break those tangents. To break the tangents, there's this little symbol here. So it's break tangent. If you click on that, now these two handles are independent. So now I can make the ball come full speed. So remember, more change going up or down is more speed, right? If it's going flat, it's low. So we're gonna make it come down full speed on every time it hits the ground, because the ball comes down full speed and hits the ground, then bounces up. It goes up until it loses all its momentum, so it kind of slows into the peak of the bounce, and then slows out of it, and it gains speed as it's going down towards the ground. It hits it at full speed, and then bounces back up, and the whole cycle repeats, right? So we're gonna try to reflect that on our curves here. Going to break this tangent also, so we can just move to one side. And we're going to rewind now and see how it looks. Does it look any better? What do you guys think? Does it look better? How do you break the tangents again? Okay, hang on, let me see. So to break the tangents, you just select the keyframe and hit this button up here. It's called break tangents. So I just broke the tangents on the bottom keyframes, the ones that hit the ground. And Clarissa, let me open the. I can't read much when I'm sharing screen. Let me stop sharing for a second so I can see.
My question, I figured I could share my screen real quick, but it's kind of an interruption. Should I wait until the end, or can I ask now?
Go ahead.
Okay, real quick.
How to remove?
Here's my ball. I want these to die.
Yeah, just select them and hit delete on your keyboard.
Right. What?
Like mark key over them, like draw a square over them.
Oh. Ah, thank you.
Yeah, there you go. And see how, are you hitting S to make keyframes?
I was, yeah.
See how it make keyframes on everything? That's what happens. It makes a bunch of keyframes. So that makes it complex when you are trying to animate. You see all these keyframes and you don't know which one you need to move. So that's why I prefer to just the channels I'm animating. That's the only ones I key. So it makes it simple. I like to keep things simple. So now we have, if I look at this, I only see the Y channel in here, which is the only one that has keyframes on it. Let's say I wanted to move the ball sideways. So I wanted to move on the Z axis, like this way. So I can set up a keyframe at frame 1 here. Say key selected at 0. And I can come to the last frame and move my ball on the z-axis. Let's say it ends over here, and key it again. Did I change the time? Yeah, I did. Key selected. So now I only have, you know, this many keyframes. Oh, I did not move the ball. Did I? I didn't. Oh, I keyed the rotate Z. Dang it. So if you ever make a mistake with the keyframes, you put the wrong channel here, you want to get rid of all those keyframes too, you can select them in here and delete them. You can also so I just mark key over it, and there's the keyframe, hit delete on your keyboard, it's gone. Or you can right click in here on the channel, and if you say break connections, those keyframes will be gone also. So let's say I make a keyframe on the rotate Y by mistake. If you right click and say break connection, the keyframes are gone. So let's say I wanted to move the ball again, so I'm gonna default the translate Y to 0, key it on the first frame, then I'm going to come to the last frame, which is 68, move the ball on the z-axis, and I can move it here on the key on the stage, or I can type the number here and then key it. Now I have two curves, both of them are really clean, you know. I think that's a little too much movement, and there's slow out and slow in, so I don't like that. I'm just gonna make it linear. Yeah, let's see how that looks. Looks a little better. It could be rotating and squashing also a little bit. It might be too much movement here. So you can change your keyframes by grabbing them here on the graph editor. And you know, if you go up, you're giving it more value. If you go down, you're giving it less value. So if I go down, I'm giving it less value. It's moving less towards the z-axis. So now it's just gonna end over there. Or I can also, if you select it, in here is what frame that keyframe is on. So it's telling me it's in frame 68, and it's moved 62 units towards the z-axis, z-positive axis. I can change that and make it be an even number, like 62 even, you know, and it changes your keyframe over here too. So you have those options here. You can change it here, or you can grab it and move it by hand. You can grab the whole thing. Let's say it's happening too fast or too slow. You don't want it to take 68 frames, you want it to take 40 frames. You can scale the whole thing. You might try this, but that's not gonna work. You can't use the scale tool in here. What you need to do is to scale your animation so it happens in a different time frame, like the whole thing. You can hit Control and right click. Control and right click. And it's gonna show you this question mark. It's asking you, you want to scale your animation. You want to make it, scale it in time, which is left to right, or you want to scale it in value, which is up and down. So I wanted to scale it in time, so I'm gonna go side to side, and wherever my mouse is, that's where it's going to scale to. So my mouse right now is on the question mark. That's where the pointer is. So if I scale, you're going to see the animation moving towards that point, right? So that's where my mouse is placed. Let me undo. So I don't want it to change in time, so I'm gonna put my mouse at the beginning of the animation, hold Control and right click and move side to side. So that's gonna move my animation towards the beginning, towards frame 1, or away from it if I go the other way. So this is to change the timing of your animation. So let's say, and my timeline here should update. Yeah, I did update. So the frames moved in time. So my animation now is faster because this happens in less time. Okay. So this is basically how you animate things in Maya. So today you learn the timeline. You can change the duration of the timeline with this. If you want it to start in negative number, you can make it start negative number, changing the 1 to negative something. If you want it to last so many frames, you can just type the number of frames you want, 300, on the very last square. That's gonna tell you, it's gonna give you a longer timeline. You can zoom in and out with this bar. The animation by default is always set to linear. Bezier curves, I guess they're called. So it always has slow in and slow out on the graph editor. You can change that default. Like if you look in here, there are stepped tangents, which that means that the animation is, like if I select, well, they're all selected already. If I select all my keyframes and I make it be step tangents, that means my animation is going to hold the position until there's a new keyframe. So there's a new keyframe. New keyframe, new keyframe, new keyframe. And this is used a lot for character animation. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's kind of like when you're drawing in 2D, you draw one extreme position and then the other extreme position, and then you can see how the acting and the timing is working, and then you add your in-betweens. This is kind of the same when you're animating a character. You can have the character in one position, then switch to the next, so you can see if the timing is right or the position looks good. You know, that's using linear tangents. And then by default it's gonna be like this, with slow in and slow out on every keyframe. You can select the keyframe and adjust the tangents if you want. Oops, they're just so tiny there. Come on. I guess I have to be in the move tool for it to work. You can adjust the tangents by breaking them. To break the tangent, you just have to hit this button over here. This is the break tangent. Break tangent. So you can make the keyframes have constant speed by selecting linear tangents, which is this button over here, right there. It just has one key and a line coming out of it. So I can make my first keyframe here go linear, and this one too, linear. So these are the very basics of animation. If you understand this, you'll be set for animating anything, basically. If you understand that change of value is going up on the positive, down on the negative, change in time is left to right. When there's no animation, the line's straight. When the animation is slowing down, the line is getting flatter, like on the top here of the curve. Like I hit here, I select this keyframe and I hit F. You'll see the line is getting flatter. That means less animation. So I hope this is clear. I know it's a lot to take on one day, but like with everything, I'll show it to you more than once so you can remember it. When you complete your drawing, so the first thing you'll do for animating is your drawing or your plan of what the ball is going to be doing on your scene. Don't make it too complex, you know. Have it bounce around. It cannot be more than 10 seconds, and I think even 10 seconds is too much. The goal the goal is to copy your reference and for the bounce to look as realistically as possible, depending on what material your ball is. So if it's a beach ball, and it bounces and moves like a beach ball, and it looks realistic, you achieve what you wanted out of the graph editor. You know, and this is where you need to keep it simple for this. So you need to keep it simple for the reason that you're trying to learn and understand the graph editor, which is your first time playing with it for most of you, and how to get it to do what you wanted. There's you can't, there's a lot of animators that jump into animating a character and just making poses, and then they can't get it to work right, and that's because they don't understand the graph editor. But if you're just moving a ball around, it's pretty simple. But that's what we're going to do first. So first, reference. Second, your plan. So go online and find reference, or record your own reference if you need to. And then once you have that, you'll start playing with the animation here, and your life should not be as hard as many animators when they start. I hope. It's still a little complicated, but I'll be here to help you. So I'll show you this again once you start animating your ball, and we'll look at your animation and try to work through things. Sometimes some animations can get pretty complex, so don't make it too complex, just enough so you can finish it. So talking about that, I need to change that due date here. For the solar system is still there, so let me get that out of there. Ball bounce pre-production, that's July 15. I think that's too far. Or is that what Monday is? Is that? No, July. Let's say July 13. So you have till Monday to come up with a plan, and find your reference. So just do your drawing in Photoshop. Make it simple. Find your reference. And these are basics. So reference and a plan are so basic, but so many people wants to skip it. Like my last class, 60% of the students did not do a drawing because they said they couldn't draw. But I show you can just make a shape in Photoshop, duplicate the layer and just move it around. So that's super simple. So you have a plan, and if your art director comes and says, "Hey, how are you gonna animate this?" you can show him your plan. No matter how crappy the drawing is, you can say, "This is what I plan to do." And then when you're animating, you're not coming up with the timing out of your head. You have, even if you're animating a cartoony animation, you have a reference. You've recorded yourself acting the scene, so you know how long it takes. You know what you can exaggerate. You don't go over the time allowed they gave you. All those things are basics, and they are not necessarily a Maya thing. They're like general basics of animation. So those are the things that I want you to do. I will see you guys on Monday, and hopefully you can pull this off fast. Maybe we can animate some other things. I remember in my first class they made me. So Alex is asking, is there shoot, let me get out of the sharing screen so I can read. Is there a way to get new keys to start off as steps? to start off as steps rather than selecting frames and then converting them to steps. Oh yeah, you can work in steps all the time. So you can let's say I wanted to add a key here on the middle, and I can be working on let's see, zoom out. I can be working on steps all the time. So I'm gonna turn on step tangent.
Can't see your screen right now.
Oh yeah, that would help, huh? Let's see. WebEx is okay. There we go. Okay. I keep thinking I'm on Discord, that I'm just sharing my screen all the time, and it's not. So I could select all my keyframes and work on stepped animation all the time, step tangents. Let's say on the Z-axis I wanted to add another keyframe here. I can just add a key here, key selected. Oh, I see what you mean. So it's adding them not in step. Is that what you're saying? Yes. Okay. So that's on your. You can, like, if you go to your Windows settings and preferences. I think animation here. Oh, where is it? Kinematics. Where is it? Animation. There's a setting here to start all your keyframes on step curves instead of. And they moved it. I used to be right there on animation. Cameras. Where is it? UI
Suppose Maya doesn't introduce a search bar for most of these.
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know.
I guess that's not too big of a deal. It would just save a lot of time.
Yeah, it would. It is in here somewhere, but you can change. By default, it's set to. Or is it on this little guy now? Let me see. Time slider.
It would be in the graph editor, wouldn't it? I think it would anyway.
Yeah, it used to be. I remember it being here on the animation settings. Auto key. So yeah, this is auto key. You can turn on auto key. Tangents. Okay, now here it is. Default tangent, non-weight tangent. You can have it be step or clamped. So now every.
Weighted and clamped?
Yeah. So.
Is it clamped or flat?
I think it's clamped. Let me see.
Flat might just draw a straight line from the first point to the second point.
Let me see. Let's create a key here. Yeah, you're right.
I think it is clamped.
Yeah, it is clamped. Yeah, but you can. It's one of the defaults. So by default.
That did it actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's if you were an animator, like a character animator, that's what Pro you would work with. And then you would select them all and turn on auto tangents, and they would break. It would break all your beautiful animation because it doesn't have any, the right timing on it. But then you can break the tangents and start slowing in or slowing out how you want it. Because if I transform this all to auto tangents, it just does whatever it wants. So I would have to go back in here and change my tangents to what I want. But this is what animators do actually in real life. It's pretty technical.
Mm-hmm.
And here in the US it takes the lucky guys that work at Disney or DreamWorks or Sony or those big studios, they get one scene and they get months to work on it. You don't have that luxury in school. You get a scene, you get a couple weeks. So, you know, so yeah, so it depends where you're working. If you're working for an animation studio, you can come up with animations in a few hours, and they might not be movie quality, but the character will be doing what you want it to do. But like big movie studios, the animators live on the graph editor. They set their poses, and then they spend all their time fixing the curves and doing stuff like that, which is I know is pretty boring. To be honest.
I actually like it.
Yeah,
I've done a lot of it with different software.
Yeah.
It's just everything's a little bit different to learn.
Yeah. There's one helpful thing here that's actually makes it more visual, like an animator would do. Like when you animate in 2D, you see this, right? You have your line, where you're going and where you've been. You can also use the onion skin, right? And there's the same thing in Maya. So if I'm in the animation menu and I say visualize, if I am used to using onion skin, that's called ghosting in Maya. So you can say ghost, and it's just showing me my previous frames, and my next frames. If you don't like that, you can say unghost. If you, and I usually don't show you this until afterwards because people start working here, and I'm just gonna show it very very broadly. So there's create editable motion trail. So the motion trail shows you the same line that the so if this was an arm, you would see what path the arm is following, and you could edit it.
What was the how did you turn the display on? I was actually working on the animation, but I didn't.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to show you because I want you guys to work the graph editor, but it's actually here. Visualize, create editable motion trail. So with whatever you have selected, if it's moving, it's gonna show you a trail. So if you have, let's say, a camera is moving, you can turn this on. You'll see what path the camera is following, and you can grab the keyframes and edit them.
So would you I'm assuming you'd prefer we don't actually use this for this assignment. You want us to get used to the graph editor.
But what I usually do is I don't show this till you guys have worked on it for a day or two. I don't do it because I'm cruel. Well, maybe a little.
You need to learn certain fundamentals, and if you skip over them to them. Easier parts, then you kind of miss out on things. Yeah,
the problem is when you know only this and you haven't played with the graph editor, there's things you can't fix in here, like the slow in and slow out, and people doesn't know how to fix them. So it's important that you guys try the graph editor first. But yeah, I've seen it. I guess I blabbered too much and it came out. So it's fine if you guys seen it. It's not a big deal. But
definitely a useful tool, one way or the other.
Yeah, just a useful tool. So the principles of animation still apply, I hope you guys watch those 12 movies. If you haven't, go watch them. If you watch them, rewatch them, till that stuff becomes second nature to you. You can think about them every time you're animating, So that's all I have for you guys today. So the first thing is gonna be your drawing. Did I change? I didn't save. See, I never do this. We're gonna save this. July 13 is your drawing. So on Monday, have your reference and your drawing, and we'll animate the bouncing ball from then on. And I'll keep helping you with it. But your plan first. Your plan and your reference first, please. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. I'll see you on Monday.
When will these videos be up?
to watch?
Yes. Yeah, I'm gonna upload yesterday's and today too right now.